Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubs at the Club, the Idaho Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. Joining you guys live after Starch Madness / Sadness and after Montana thankfully lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament. We're moving on to spring football, guys. It's brave, bold Brian Marceau. Brian, spring is upon us.
Yeah, dude, spring is upon us. And man, I just found out before the show, like, hey, spoiler alert. I didn't realize that in the Thomas Ford era, like his thing so far is he's a really open dude to the extent possible. I didn't realize that 2 questions was actually like a 7-minute thing posted after practice, which you can find on the Go Vandals YouTube, whatever. So I have some research to do. Dallas, mercifully, you did that. But anyway, that's a long way of saying happy for something new, right?
Amen to that. And as always, well, maybe not always, maybe most of the time, sometimes, the man in Moscow, he drives Carton. It's producer, redacted, Marten. Marten, how's it going, man?
Going good. It's nice and warm in Moscow. It's happy to be back on another week, another show, and yeah, excited to hear what you guys talk about this week.
And Marten did not get upset that I named his car Carton, so that is now a thing. So everybody know that his Honda Element is called Carton. It's happening. T-Cash, it's happening. Gentlemen, let's just jump right into it. Today was the first day of spring football. Brian, your gut thoughts and reactions, knowing that, this is a completely meaningless practice to us. We didn't get to see a bit of it. We got to hear some of the things that the coaches said afterwards and the players said afterwards. But for us, this is the first post-EC practice, the first true post-EC day of Vandal football. How are you feeling?
The first thing is, it's a weird balance to strike of, am I excited? Yes. Now, there isn't the same sense of urgency like when EC year 1 spring football was rolling. I don't know if you remember this. Our listeners might remember. There was a huge amount of interest because we all were hoping to see change. There is still interest, but that interest that was in year 1 EC, that was kind of like a fear-based interest of like people being terrified of like a clusterfuck because that's what
could this be the end of the Vandal
program
if they don't get this coach correct? Yeah.
I don't have that same freak out right now with Coach Thomas Ford. Now I'm interested to see what comes out, of course. And we have 1 practice in the books. We're going to have interviews with people who are at practice, through the next couple of weeks. So there'll be more about the actual practice to talk about soon, of course. But it's this weird balance of both excited but comfortable. And if you're a good football team, spring football is supposed to be comfortable. I'm going to enunciate this once so we don't have to enunciate it the rest of the months here. Obviously, the first goal in spring football is to have no one get hurt. And the second goal is that players who do well stay at your school and don't bail. We don't need to say that again. We all know that's and that's big picture what we're hoping for. So now we can pay attention to the minutia. I listened to the minute version of Thomas Ford's interview after the first practice, and what it pulled me back to was what Johnny Mallory said when he was on our show, when he said he'd watched Thomas Ford at practice, that Thomas Ford is everyone knows he's a recruiter. What people don't know unless you're pretty close to him, he's a pretty hardcore, like aggressive teacher. And that's what just when he was talking about what he's trying to do in practice, that's what came across in the small amount that I heard so far is, look, there's a ton of guys who are new. There's a ton of underclassmen who are going to take on bigger roles. There's a lot of teaching to do. And I guess, what he talked about is there's a lot of the previous staff culture he wants to maintain, but kind of the thing he's pushing further is more intensity about getting as much as you can out of each day, which a young group like this, that's what they obviously need.
I'm muted. There we go. I never remember where my mute button is. Too many of them. In the longer video that was posted to Vandal Athletics or Vandal Football on YouTube, I don't remember which one. You can find it pretty easily by finding the Vandals on YouTube. Ford mentioned that a lot, Brian, of the quote that he said is, every day is an opportunity to get better, but you only get one. And that's kind of the mentality that they are seeming to try to make the culture of this new era of Vandal football is, man, every time you hit that field, like you got to treat it like it's your last one, is what it feels like. A lot more, again, like you said, that intent and just more intentionality, I think, with practicing. He told a story of as a party, who's obviously, this is his third head coach now, as in the Vandal history for him. Eli Cummings also on to coach number 3. As a party, I guess Ford caught an offensive lineman maybe not practicing the way he should have, and as a party came up to him and said, "Hey, coach, don't worry about it. I'll take care of him. I got this." And so he told this again. Go listen to the video. It's significantly better than hearing me recap Thomas Ford speaking about it. Basically, the point is the guys that knew Ford from the first go round are the guys that are already bought in and know, like, hey, this guy, saw him on the sideline for 2 years, like you said, Brian, just so much energy as a position coach. Now he's the guy in charge. There's a bunch of people that know him. So for the more young Vandals that don't know him as much, it's so huge, I think, to have those voices in the locker room that are like, no, this guy's been here. He's done this. You got to buy in. We fully believe in this guy. Let's hit the ground running. It's really cool to see the vibes around the program don't seem to have changed much in the change from Eck to Ford, which again I think is kind of what you look for, right? When your coach moves on to the FBS, because he's done a pretty fantastic job in 3 years here, reviving what was definitely looking like a dead program. Oh, well, then you're able to bring in guys, and so your hiring is different than, I don't know, the last 7 or 8 Vandal hires for the football program, Brian. Like the idea of, hey, this team is not just starting over, like that's real. This is a squad with, we're going to get into it, guys. The roster's different. Eck took some players. There's guys that are gone. There's guys that moved on that didn't move on to Eck, that moved on to other opportunities in the FBS, or some of them in the FCS. The bulk of the roster is still here. Yeah, they're not the names that we knew because it wasn't the too deep of last year, or the starting 11 on both sides. But there is still a bunch of talent that has been accumulated here. So it was really nice to, again, if you go back through, Eli Cummings, Sam Brown, and Nate Azzopardi also had videos uploaded to the Vandal Athletics YouTube page. Man, everybody is excited and vibing. And yeah, it's spring football. It's the first day of football of the year. Of course, they're going to be excited. But man, it is a completely different feeling than the last time we had a first-time spring football coach. The vibes are, hey, well, this is a good program and we're going to keep this shit running, instead of, hey, we don't know who's going to play here. We don't know who's going to do what. This is we got to remake this roster in our image. None of that. This is, there's some groups that are going to get worked out, but man, the excitement around this program is quite high right now.
Yeah, and a couple of stories to follow, like the brain dead one, but it's brain dead because it matters, is quarterback, right? So like, hey, one practice in, basic news is kind of exactly what you'd expect the basic news to be. Is Nick Joseph and Jack Wagner right now are the guys dueling it out for QB1, with early returns are, of course, also things in line with what you'd expect. Joseph strength, according to Coach Ford, has been decision making, and Jack Wagner's strength has been his arm. Both those guys, they're both super young. I mean, Joseph will be a redshirt freshman. Jack Wagner will be a redshirt sophomore, right? So spring's a great time for those guys to develop. There's going to be some wide receiver news, of course. That's new names. Now, wide receiver is a position group that can turn over at a lot of schools, and it's always a position that, right when you hear about the guys leaving, it freaks you out. But there's a lot of guys who want to catch passes and score touchdowns. So I'm not particularly worried about the progress in the wide receiver room. But according to early practices, Tony Harsey, Marquand McCraney, and, man, I'm going to get this name wrong, Davion Superales. How do I say that, Dallas? The guy who once committed to Montana State as a quarterback.
Yeah, Superales.
Yeah, Davion Superales were guys who stood out early. Any other stat? So I mean, that's kind of the offense, right? So we know we're going to have new pass catchers, new quarterback, running back room is going to be relatively stable. And the O-line has a good number of holdovers, plus some guys who are second string who are going to take on larger roles in the upcoming year. Really, to me, the story of spring ball that I'm wanting to track is in spring football, on average, what you want is the offense to not look as good compared to the defense. And then there's a ton of new names on the defensive side of the football. So I guess, Dallas, I'll throw it to you. Defensive side, early returns, what's Coach Ford saying? What are we looking for?
So, Brian, one thing I do want to quickly point on was, again, Davion, I believe, is the first name. I missed that. Yeah. Super Alice is his last name. I don't know if he ever ended up making it to Montana State. He's from the east side, the west side of Washington, played at Graham Kapowsin. I'm sure most of the Seattleites are familiar enough with that school. Again, he was recruited as a quarterback to Montana State, but then is here as a receiver, and Ford specifically said he is one of the fastest guys on the team. And to expect to see him a lot, and he said there are 6 to 7 receivers that Idaho should expect to see a good amount of playing time out of. It's a very deep room.
One of which is still Michael Graves on the 2025 roster.
Michael Graves, and then Lanyetta Alexander Jr., who transferred in from Montana State. So there's definitely some guys that are names. I mean, again, Graves has been here for a while now. Alexander Jr. was not here, but we've seen his brother. Good luck to him at UW. But Brian, the defensively, one of the things that Ford said a lot was, hey, the pass rushers and linebackers, there's going to be some new faces here. He specifically wanted to give shout outs to a couple different guys across a handful of different positions. Actually, he shouted out Sam Brown. I think most people that listen to us or have watched Vandal football the last couple of years are familiar with who Sam Brown is. But Matthias McLean is one of the edge rushers he named as looking really, really good today. And then at the linebacker position, Braxton Lawrence, who is a linebacker from Tennessee, actually. He's listed as a sophomore on the roster. But again, if you're referencing the roster right now, their years are going to be all sorts of wrong. He was a true freshman last year. He played in one game. Realistically, he's probably a redshirt freshman.
Yeah, redshirt freshman.
But he's going to be listed as a sophomore until 2025 starts and the actual process goes through. So, but that's one of the names he mentioned. So he did point out, hey, defensively, this is going to be a different looking team. But one thing Sam Brown said in his interviews that were uploaded to the Vandal page on YouTube today, this team is going to be very aggressive and almost angry on defense. They're going to hurt you and they're going to make you not want to play them. So a little bit different mentality, I thought, than last year's. Hey, we're going to play cover 4 and just try to keep the ball in front of us. Did not sound like that's really the attitude they're going in with this year. Again, we'll see what that actually looks like on the field come 7 months from now, 6 months from now. But the way Sam Brown was talking about it was like, man, this is going to be a fast, hard-hitting defense.
Yeah, and then another thing you brought up you brought up in our notes, of course no one else has seen this, is early returns on new strength coach Jamel Cooper, our players citing, look, hey, no put down to the work Caleb Heim did, but you could look it's important to have a good strength coach. Look at what North Dakota State has done over the last 2 decades. Part of that has been continuity with their strength coach. Early returns on Jamel Cooper as a hire are very high, as in just a different type of focus, a little bit more on speed over raw strength. Mm-hmm. And that might matter for this upcoming year. There's a chance that, so there's a reason why the focus in exercise, not just in high level athletics, but just in the culture as a whole, those things do change over time. And so when I was in high school back in the early 2000s, the big focus was always, hey, bench, squat, power clean, absolutely as much as you possibly can. We have better science now. So focuses are a little bit different, and the focus that Cooper's had appears to be much more functional and speed based, and that may help with the injury issues Idaho had. Which there's no way we can make this conclusive. We absolutely had people very close to the situation say they thought part of the reason Idaho had as many issues with injuries last year was a little bit too heavy a focus on just putting up as much as you possibly can volume wise in the weight room and not having a more functional approach. We're going to see how that bears out. I know on paper that sounds like it makes sense. That sounds like a move in the right direction. But look, we're tracking changes, and I gotta say, if I had to look, you and I are both on the same page. We're stoked about a ton of the hires. The strength coach might be an under the radar huge change.
I mean, I will say I have no bias in this whatsoever. But hiring a member of the 2021 Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams strength and conditioning team to be your head strength coach, it's a pretty good resume. So really nice to see that. Eli Cummings has mentioned it as well, that Eli is bigger this year. He looks like it. If you get on social media and look at Vandal football today, you're going to see a fair amount of shirtless Eli Cummings. Dude got bigger, but he got bigger without losing the speed, supposedly. Thomas Ford said in his interviews, man, loves the speed of this team. He thinks this team is going to be one of the fastest teams around. So love that. Hanging out in the comment section, Kevin Marshall, one of our longtime friends, interested to see how the OL comes together. Eck did wonders with the patchwork group. Vandals are due for a healthy year in that group. Could not agree more. Vandals haven't had a healthy offensive line in 20 years, it feels like. But as a party, specifically mentioned that he really likes Coach Ensley, knew him a little bit from the camps. Doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of drop off from the Eck Booth era to the Ford Ensley era. Feels that the coaching is right up there. And what's the guy going to do? Come out and be like, yeah, our new coach fucking sucks. We're going to be terrible. Like, he's not going to come out and say that. So you keep these with a grain of salt. But as a party is jacked, Ford came out and said he thinks there are 12 to 13 guys in this offensive line group that could legitimately play a ton for a good Vandals team. So love to hear that. Again, the guys, the depth sounds like it's here. And then just standouts wise, he called out Azo as a guy he's getting more laterally quick, which again, part of that Jamel Cooper thing is being a little bit better at moving, which helps significantly on an offensive line. James Aldridge in the comment section, when talking with Coach today, said we have about 8 guys that'll be in the offensive line rotation. So a little bit different than the 13 he mentioned in the full presser interview. But again, basically, there's a lot more healthy and good offensive linemen than we've seen in a while. He also wanted to point out Nathan Knapik. Said Nathan Knapik's a lot bigger, looks a lot stronger, had a really good day today. So,
on paper, Knapik has put on about 40-ish pounds, since graduating from high school.
So, it's a pretty big change for older brother came in and walked into the left tackle position and held it down immediately. Little brother maybe not quite as quick of an impact, but sounds like he's bulked up just enough to be a linchpin on the line, I'm sure, for years. So, Brian, that's a lot of the big stuff that we covered, or that Ford covered in the interviews. The one thing I did want to circle back to is quarterback position. He did say he has a lot of faith and a lot of talent, or a lot of faith in the talent of these 4 guys. Feels really good about the entire group and thinks that whoever does win the job of the 4, it's not a competition between Joseph Eck and Wagner, while those are the 2 names that he mentioned as like, hey, they're the leaders in the clubhouse because they're the guys who played the most last year. He did say all 4 of those guys he thinks very highly of. So it didn't sound like anybody asked him if there was going to be an incoming, upperclassman from another program. But at the moment, he sounds pretty content with the quarterback position as it is.
And I think that's the only answer you'd give at this point. I wouldn't be shocked if a transfer does come in later, but part of that's probably going to depend on how the guys look like they're progressing as we get towards the end of spring. I don't know any coach in the Big Sky who, if you could get a good upperclassman to compete, would say no to that. But Ford's not an idiot. He's not going to, I don't think he's going to just go out and say that at the start of spring. I think either it happens or it doesn't. And that's what we're going to learn from it. I guess one thing I do want to let people know about, and hey, this is just a me thing. So James Aldrich in the comment section references interview. James, your show's Vandals Weekly, which I believe it's Vandals Weekly, right? James, you can correct me. Pretty sure it's Vandals Weekly. So look for his show on Spotify, podcast, wherever you download from. But the other thing is we usually don't promote like university content, or I don't. I do want to say, if the coaches and the players and the football team itself are going to be like doing extensive springtime interviews to keep people engaged, please reward them by checking out those videos like I will. The page that you'd want to look for it's just the YouTube page for Vandal Athletics, which is at Vandal Athletics. There are 4 videos posted after the first spring practice. So if you want to hear directly from the players and coaches, and it's both, it's head coach Tom Ford and 3 players, check out their YouTube page. I will. And I mean, this is another way things are going to be different. And just a way that to me, this is kind of exciting to have, because I liked Jason Eck doing the 2 questions. I like the outreach he did. I think Thomas Ford's just going to be a different version of that, but I think he's going to be a less produced, more just directly open version. So if guys are doing stuff that we want them to do to connect with, the best thing we can do is reward them, get them some views.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. That's why I keep bringing it up, because again, I will fully admit it's where I learned a lot of this content we're talking about right now, is by just going to the Vandal Athletics page and listening to what the players and coach had to say for themselves. So please go check that out. Go reward them. Keep them pushing out that content, because the more of that content that they push out, the more stuff we have to talk about with spring football. It's pretty hard for Brian, Martin, and I to go cover a practice at 6 a.m. in Moscow, Idaho. Maybe a little bit easier for Martin because he doesn't have to drive quite as far. But again, it's not like Martin's full-time job is covering the Vandals. Like, we all have jobs and commitments and just can't do it.
I do have a spring football question for you. That's going to relate to it'll relate to Idaho football, but it does not do that yet. So some of the bigger FBS schools, we're talking like Texas and Nebraska, they're still doing spring football, but they're not actually doing the spring game. Dallas, your thoughts?
Those are my thoughts, Brian. Just right there. Anybody that's listening, go take a peek on youtube.com/Tubs at the Club, or whatever, however the hell you get to Tubs at the Club on YouTube. Really, Brian, my thoughts are, I've never fully explained this on the show, but I think spring football is an absolute joke.
You mean the spring game, not the practices, correct?
Again, let me finish the sentence here. I think spring football is a joke if you are not involved in the program directly. If you are involved in the program directly, yes, having a couple weeks of practice, couple weeks to get with the guys, especially when it's your first spring as the head coach, because the whole staff turned over when most of them left for New Mexico. Yes, that's extremely important for the fans. Man, I know that the spring game is like, it's a cool opportunity to go see the team, and the game itself is a joke, man. Like, it's not particularly, like, it's not super heavily officiated. You're obviously trying to not get guys hurt. You're trying to get realistically everybody's getting some snaps. It's a cool thing to do to get people like really involved in the program in the spring when it's months and months away from the actual game. However, and a shout out to Burl Trout with that beautiful Anaheim Ducks logo, showing the hitting the target here right on the head. Look, Texas and Nebraska and USC are shutting their spring games down. Most big programs are not going to do it. They're going to replace it with things like 7-on-7 drills and different skills competitions. And they're going to replace it with things that people are still going to really enjoy. And still, if you're, say you're a Wazoo fan and you're coming up to Spokane for the Crimson and Gray game like you did 10 years ago when they used to hold it at Joe Albee. Okay, so now it's not going to be a football game. Now it's going to be, I don't know, the quarterbacks are going to have competitions to see who can hit the most amount of the field goal posts with 10 throws. Like, you're going to have weird, cool stuff. It's still going to be a lot of fun for whoever's out there, at the event. But as far as the actual football goes, man, for, every random Dick, Tom, and Sally, and every random ass person that's listening to us and listening to the spring football content, like, guys, it's practices against yourself. Like you're really not. We're not breaking out like, oh man, Super Bowls are going to be won by the plays being created here in spring football. That's not really how it works. It's a lot of, hey, let's work on the fundamentals and let's work on doing things correctly. Speaking of that, again, looping back to the Thomas Ford interview, he's mentioned specifically that the quarterbacks are doing things a little bit different technically now than they did under the previous staff. They're working on dropbacks a little bit differently, doing a little bit different stuff in the run game. Like, that's what spring football is for making your adjustments to your playbooks and getting guys a little bit better coaching because they haven't seen you in a handful of months. It's, we're not going to see on whatever day the spring football game is, we're not going to see whatever Idaho trots out game 1 of the 2025 actual season. It's going to look a whole lot different than that. I mean, just think back to X first year and Giovanni McCoy being the quarterback of the spring football game. And this channel, the chat attached to it, our Discord, the internet as a whole, people were pretty concerned about the Idaho offense, Brian. And then what happened? Hey, Giovanni McCoy went and won the Jerry Rice Award because the offense did not have any single problems. So you got to take everything in spring with a grain of salt, because if you're not putting out roses, does it really matter because again, spring with Eck was not all roses. This team's going to make a playoff run, and then they went and made a playoff run anyways. So that's kind of where I fall on spring football, Brian. I apologize for just filibustering there for quite a while, but as somebody who's been to too many spring football practices and games in his life, look, it's really cool as an event, but as far as the actual football, the practices are what's important, not the game. Yeah.
So I've been to a scrimmage as well as a spring game, and it's harder to make it to the scrimmage itself. They're not treated the same way as the event of the spring game itself. So I think the scrimmages actually matter a ton, but that's just because it's part of practice, and it's especially in the era we live in now, where you're essentially building a team from at not 100% scratch, but partially scratch at the start of the year. Every practice matters. So that in that way, I think spring football is very important for establishing a hierarchy, getting more reps. The spring game itself, I think that's universally understood that is the ceremony around which fundraising is organized. And that's the entire point. I mean, hey, last year, the ones at Idaho, like they were touch. It wasn't even tackle. So like we understand the spring game itself is not about the spring game. And in the era we live in college athletics, and this isn't just college athletics. I mean, we don't like stand up on our soapbox here for the most part. It's not the point of the show. But increasingly, when like monetization is the ethos of absolutely everything, that absolutely does matter in college. Well, why would a school choose to have a big event for people to go for free and decide which of their players they want to offer money to pull away? That's the direction we're going to go until we find that middle ground where there's at least a few more rules. We're going to see schools just be more protective of themselves because they should, because they feel they can't just rely on loyalty to maintain their roster. Because the jury's in, schools can't simply rely on loyalty. So until those rules are in, like some of the stuff that we like, and we all suspend disbelief when we're paying attention to the spring game. We all know it only matters so much. We all know you won the spring game if you didn't lose a starter or a second stringer to injury. Like, hey, that's all understood. But that doesn't mean it's not fun to have an extra event. And it doesn't mean it's insignificant to not have a big event that draws more people for fundraising. We're just at a point until there are actual rules that maintain roster continuity to some extent. Some of the fun things we're used to are going to go away. So what I care about for the team are the practices. What I care about for the team are the scrimmages. And if you can get to those Saturday scrimmages, those are the practices you're going to learn the most. I went to one of the scrimmages. That's when I first saw Anthony Woods look, as a freshman, kind of explode as clearly the best running back in that group when we had no idea who he was. But I mean, that's my long way of saying I like spring football. I like the spectacle of it is if you have just one team you're paying attention to like we do. but this is bigger than Idaho. This is just the moment we're in college athletics.
Yeah. When again, not that Nebraska is the Nebraska of the 1990s or even the early 2000s, but when Matt Rule comes out and is basically like, yeah, tampering is just not even a thing anymore. This would be like an open meat market for our players. We're not going to just advertise, here's our guys, they're good, please steal them. I mean, that if the guy at Nebraska is concerned that other programs are going to be pilfering from him, you gotta, you trickle down economics might be bullshit, but hey, you follow it down here in football, and yeah,
it'll get here eventually.
It's gonna get here eventually. Nebraska, let's say Dylan Raiola gets picked off and goes to Texas next year. Okay, well, no, Nebraska's looking for a quarterback. They're not looking to pick a quarterback out of USC. I mean, they'd love to, but realistically, what's the best way they're going to land a guy? Looking at a guy below them who's looking for bigger opportunity. So it's a cascading effect, Brian.
Yeah, and look, we see this in Big Sky basketball, which is the horror story you might have of open player transfers. No, that is the reality of Big Sky basketball right now. You truly have a year. It's not quite to that extent in football, but it does get a little bit more like, if your team's good, it gets a little bit more like that every year. And the point of that isn't to, sit and bitch about it. I think everyone in the world knows at some point there needs a middle ground is and has to be found. We're not there yet. But until we're actually there, the only thing programs can do is protect themselves as much as they can. Now, I think at the coaching level, you're still at the point right now in the Big Sky where you can make the decision more based off, hey, do you think it's more helpful for the program to raise the extra money of the spring game right now, knowing that the guys that you were going to lose, like you mostly probably already lost them at the end of the season in the first place. So the Big Sky itself may be insulated from spring changes for a while, but it's always like it starts in the big conferences and it does move down to the others, which I guess is a way of saying, in the same way that you build a team like for a year right now, like just enjoy the stuff while it's here.
Brian, we can circle back to X-Ray Alexander. We were talking about him being a potential Big Sky MVP. And then he was gone from Idaho after a year, went to UCF, played a pretty good amount, moved on to UW. Like this is how it goes. And I'm not faulting anybody for it. It's just, this is how it is. So, there is the other foot. Captain 58 in the comment section saying, I like making one scrimmage an event, get some butts in seats, get the good game jerseys on, maybe find a new player to drop some NIL money on. Yeah, absolutely. That's the best part of those events. And that's where I think we're going to see it over the next couple of years until whatever rules are going to exist in the NCAA are realistically what replaces the NCAA in the next handful of years. Whatever rules are going to come up that will hopefully allow for a spring practice and a spring game to not be poached by a bunch of other coaches and squads. But man, it feels like we are, if things keep going down this path, we're 3 to 5 years away from every single school in the country deciding spring game's not worth it. Let's do the fun, weird stuff, 7-on-7, I don't know, tug of war with the offensive and defensive line. Like let's do weird stuff. Steve Kurtz in the comments section, SEC hammer. I mean, yes, Steve, but everybody points out the SEC while everybody seems to just kind of forget the Big Ten is doing just as much, if not worse. So I try to just loop them all together in those with power two, realistically. Those two are just going to break everything off of the NCAA eventually anyways. So that kind of leads us into maybe talking about the House settlement, Brian. Do you have anything else you want to cover on Vandal Spring football before we take a nice trip down the Snake River? And then,
yeah, I mean, we're one practice in. We've covered what we can. There's more that this is going to be one of the best places to get news on spring football. So just tune in next week.
And James Aldridge says, I like spring games because my little monkey brain enjoys watching football, even if it's booty cheeks football. James, as a proud card-carrying fan of the AAF, the XFL, the USFL, the UFL, which sounds like it might be gone now too. you don't have to talk to me about booty cheeks football, but again, we're splitting hairs here, gentlemen. Martin, I swear to God, if you put that Cooper Cup jersey on the screen, I am just leaving this call. Nope, I'm out. See you guys.
Thanks, Martin. So, Dallas, glad you're back, because we get, it's the time of the show where we get to tell people, if you want a great all-inclusive week-long vacation,
don't look past your backyard. Hughes River Expeditions has been vandal-owned and operated since 1976, and they're ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of No Return, the Salmon River Canyons, or even the Selway. You can check out special trips like one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine
bitches.
There we go. Run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs. And guys, I say this every single week. Fish the most remote stretches of river in the entire United States. All you've got to do is just bring your clothes. HRE will handle everything else. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 406-540-4450. Again, that's 406-540-4450. Or check them out at hughesriver.com. All right, Brian and Martin, if you want to get in on this too, you're welcome to. We have come to the point of this show that I have been trying to avoid for well, I guess it's not over a year, but it feels like it's been over a year. The House settlement, guys. Let's break into this. The House versus NCAA, which is going to massively change the scope of college athletics for at least 1 year, probably longer, but who knows what's going to happen. I certainly don't believe this is going to be the end of it all, but it's coming real close. April 7th is when the judge, I don't remember her name, but she's the same judge that's kicked the NCAA's ass in a couple different court cases over the last 15 years. She's making her decision over the final settlement on April 7th, or scheduled for April 7th. It'll probably get delayed with the different people that have had issues and pushed back on it. But Brian, what we're seeing is that there is definitely not a unanimous front across college football and college athletics as a whole of schools saying, yep, this is a good thing, we all got to do this, or schools choosing not to. Like, we're seeing it splitting inside conferences, even that Montana State signs, Idaho doesn't. So what is this going to change for us, Brian? Your immediate thoughts and understanding of the House settlement and how it's going to impact Idaho.
Well, to make clear, Idaho opted out of the House settlement, as did most Big Sky schools. At this point, Montana State, I know, opted in. University of Montana at least said they were going to opt in. I expect Sacramento State, who we'll talk about later, as being a school to opt in. But most Big Sky schools are not going to opt into the House settlement. And hey, the cliff notes on the House settlement of not opting in, not really that much changes at Idaho. Like, what changes is competing against schools who do opt into the House settlement. And like, hey, to my knowledge, Dallas, if you opt into the House settlement, there's a few more cliff notes for sure, but the basics are there's a limited number of roster spots, but your number of theoretical scholarships you can hand out is higher, and schools can be involved in direct payments as part of NIL to student athletes. If you do not opt in like Idaho, nothing changes. Like, you have the current, like Idaho has the current amount of scholarships it can give. I think the number is like 63, right? Which it can also split those scholarships up into partials in the FCS. And Idaho needs to work through a third party for NIL actually, University of Idaho just hasn't done direct work with a third party. It's kind of up to a third party to create contracts, whatever, which the 1889 collective, that's the University of Idaho one. We've had representatives on the show. That's what they're doing. So my kind of big takeaway is not exactly shocked, because look, even if let's say Idaho opts in, the two main concerns are, do you truly have enough money to offer extra scholarships? Most Big Sky schools would not. And two, do you feel like the athletic administration would do well with running NIL, including at this point, clearly having to prioritize some sports, some athletes over others? And is there any concern about long-term Title IX ramifications if it is run by the schools themselves, whereas a third-party entity, they're not the university, so they likely don't have to care about Title IX in the same way? They may still want to be as equitable as possible, but that's not the same as having regulatory requirements to truly hit Title IX metrics. So broadly speaking, I think Idaho probably made the right choice not opting in, because I don't know if they'd have the scholarships. And hey, there's a lot about Idaho that we like in the football team itself and some of the individual sports. We've been pretty clear here, like the higher level administration, we don't actually have a ton of faith in doing extra work at all. So I guess I'm happy Terry Golick has nothing to do now with NIL funds being directly distributed, as I think she would find many ways to screw it up. So I am happy that that ball has been taken out of her court by Idaho opting out. Side note, if you just expect the top level Idaho administration is not going to put in extra work, of course they're going to opt out, because if they opt in, they have to do extra stuff. So like this, you truly could have predicted this just off the simple math we've talked about on the show is expect the highest level of Idaho administration to not try to do anything extra.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, this time it's the right call, because I don't want Terry to have anything to do with NIL.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a dichotomy here that I want to hit, because on one side it is extremely easy to just look at, volleyball, men's basketball, women's basketball, the end of the Petrino era. Most things, it's pretty easy to point out and look at. Golick didn't take action when she could have or should have, or wow, I feel like even a monkey would have taken action there. We run into that, yes, and that's certainly a really good reason for Idaho to opt out, just because their athletic department's not going to do anything with it. But the other thing here, Brian, and this is the problem that the House versus NCAA settlement is just kicking the can down the road on. The NCAA institutions that opt in are now permitted to compensate student athletes directly. So that's not like new money. If Idaho opts in and now it's, hey, we've got to put some money aside for players, and I think the cap is going to be like $20 million in 2025, 2026. Idaho doesn't have a athletic budget of $20 million. You're not going to go compete with the USCs and the SEC schools of the world. But even at a smaller level, how does a school like Idaho find the money to set aside to pay players on top of everything they're already doing in the budget? It just doesn't line up. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, I think, for most schools below the Power 4 level. I think that it's not the best. But again, that's why the P4 all got together and were like, yeah, we gotta sign on to this, and they're all pushing it through because they're the ones that are going to survive the best. It's the lower conferences here are the ones that are going to have to scrap and fight and figure things out, as again, things are certainly going to be even more haves versus have-nots. Brian, this is seeing the Montana schools do it and Idaho not, like, that does terrify me, because what if that means when inevitably the NCAA is gone or it's completely restructured or whatever's going to happen with it, where does that leave Idaho if Montana and Montana State are getting attached to maybe larger directions? And like you said, Sac State probably one of the schools that opts in because they're probably going to go FBS. They're certainly trying to. It's gonna break that gap even wider than it is now, and it's a slippery slope, Brian. The back pay money that they're paying for athletes for 10 years, but not before. Like, there's so many things here that if you're not a school like, again, I'll say Alabama. If you're not Alabama, who certainly does not need the NCAA anywhere near as much as the NCAA needs Alabama, then I mean you'd be caught with your dick in your hand here. So
one more thing to add with the Montana schools is, because I actually think opting in as a Big Sky school is a pretty big gamble. Montana and Montana State, look, we know they make more money game day.
Yep.
And we know that because of that, that gives them certain flexibilities that other schools don't have. But there's potentially a lot of money that would have to go through the university if you're going to opt in. And the Montana schools are in a pretty conservative state. They struggle they fund athletics the way they do through ticket sales. If the minute those schools are not selling tickets the way they are right now, their funding situation gets tight instantly because they don't get the institutional support that, like, Sac State gets an ocean of institutional support, meaning funds from the university itself, from whether that's from tuition or from the state itself, that then go directly to athletics. Those Montana schools don't have an ocean of money to do institutional support, just like Idaho and Idaho State. We don't have the ticket sales that Montana and Montana State have, but those schools are similar. Of they're not going to get an ocean of funding from the state itself to keep pushing athletic budgets at the level you might look at if you're opting into the House settlement, and also just, with the way that conference realignment changes, and depending on the conference you're in, your budget may have to change, which is, to put it short, I think if you were not sure, opting out was the right call. And I also don't think anyone should assume where we are today is permanent. It's probably permanent for like 2 to 3 years, but the college football landscape it's amidst tectonic shifts. And I don't know, like, the next domino could fall next year, and then the House settlement becomes completely irrelevant. So that's why, Dallas, you had been putting off talking about this so much, is because you and me are kind of similar. Does the House settlement itself matter to some extent? Yes, but like for a couple years when the next change happens.
Yeah. Again, this is just the NCAA finally falling face first into it, or ass backwards, whichever direction you really want to point it. This is them falling into something that they should have been proactive about 15 years ago. I don't remember who the judge is, nor do I care. But the judge in this case is the same judge that ruled against them in the O'Bannon NCAA trial 15 years ago. That's what killed most of the sports video games, or college sports video games at the time, because people weren't getting paid what they should have been. There was another ruling a couple years later. I don't remember the name of that case, but the judge in this case has ruled against the NCAA in things that are very, very similar to this for a long time.
And the reason, to be fair, the NCAA gets ruled against in essentially every case that comes before them, because once the money came in, suddenly it's essentially de facto employment. But
yep, exactly. So what I'm getting at is, if the NCAA didn't make a settlement here and get all the conferences on board, like, again, I've been predicting the NCAA is on a slow death crawl for the last 10 years, but I mean, they're getting a stay of execution here, but they've got to make some serious changes to how this goes. The amount of money that they make out of March Madness, I mean, everybody saw it 5-6 years. I guess it's been more than 5 or 6 years now. But the women's weight room that went viral a handful of years ago, that was, somebody went down to Walmart and bought a couple just free weights and just threw them down on a pad in the room and said, "Here's your weight room." That was very obviously, here's the NCAA making all this money, and absolutely none of it going back to the people who are making them that money. Again, this is a temporary stay of execution before they're probably going to get the needle or 5 bullets in the head at some point in my lifetime, because the NCAA has made it pretty clear, like you said, Brian, they've lost almost every single court case they get themselves into because there's money involved, and they're typically doing some shady shit with it. So we'll see what happens. I think Idaho made the best decision they could at the time, which is don't opt into this. There's no way Idaho can fit 105 full scholarships in this budget. Not a chance. It makes more sense to stick with the status quo for now, at least to me. This could all age very poorly, and hell, it might will. But it just feels to me, Brian, like you stick with the course of inaction here and let the dominoes fall a little bit more before taking that leap of fully signing on to this. I mean, shit, we're doing this March 25th. a week from now, we could find out that one of the injunctions filed by Livy Dunn or one of the other major athletes that have been rightfully screwed, wrongfully screwed in the last 10 years of all these players not getting paid the money they should have. Maybe one of those injunctions pushes this off for a year. Maybe it pushes it off for 2 years. Maybe it doesn't matter at all. But we're just at a point where I don't feel comfortable being able to say, yeah, 100%, this is happening April 7th, and this is never going to change. And these are the rules that we're going to compete by for. I couldn't even commit to that for 3 years, much less 30, Brian.
Yeah, there is one other in the small amount of time we have FCS news I think we want to get to.
Oh, yes. Troy Taylor fired for sexually assaulting people and doing things that he shouldn't have been doing. I don't think there's actual sexual assault in there, but Troy Taylor did a lot of really bad things. Probably not coming back to save Ballsack State. They might be going FBS.
Well, no, it was just,
that's weird.
It was just it was more like retaliation. So to be clear, the first thing Dallas referenced, if anyone's listening, did not for a fact happen, and we're not saying it happened because it didn't. The Big Sky news is, look, hey, the WAC football conference, United Athletic, and whatever the fuck it's called, is
United
falling
Athletic
apart. Yeah, Stephen F. Austin left for the Southland. They're down to like 5 teams in the WAC now, which a few years ago had like the dream we joked about here about becoming an FBS conference, which we brought up. Like, you can't just say you're an FBS conference. Like, it just doesn't work that way. Even though there were some people who used to host this show who said, hey, they can have a charter. No, they can't. It doesn't work that way. This isn't like 1984. So the WAC itself is falling apart. And there are reports from Mike McFeely that Utah Tech, a member of the WAC right now, and potentially Southern Utah are attempting to get into the Big Sky, with Utah Tech being, the reporting is they conclusively applied to become a member across all sports. The reporting on Southern Utah itself was a little bit fuzzy, and there's very low expectations of SUU rejoining the Big Sky after short notice bailing in 2022. Which I bring this up because simultaneously it has not been officially announced, but Sacramento State has made it pretty clear they're going to leave the FCS as quickly as they can. There's no official news on what the landing spot is going to be. Just spoiler, there's only 2 theoretical landing spots for Sac State. Either they get to join the worst conference in America, that's Conference USA. Or wait, sorry, there's two conferences in the southwest of the U.S. and the FBS. I care so little about them. I don't remember. It's the one UTEP and like Sam Houston, or I think that's Conference USA. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're either going to get bailed out by Conference USA
at this point, but
by Conference USA trying to say, hey, we'll take anyone, or they're going to be an FBS independent. Now, that's just 3 teams we've covered. Of Sac State probably on their way out. We know UC Davis is a Mountain West member in everything but football, which means UC Davis, they're still in football, but I don't know. Don't be shocked if they have half a foot out the door. So we've got potentially 2 of the California schools with a foot out the door. I know people are going to speculate about Cal Poly. There's no news about Cal Poly whatsoever. So until there is not. UC Davis and Sac State are in some ways looking like they may be out the door sooner rather than later. With that as a setting, Dallas, your thoughts on the Big Sky potentially adding Utah Tech, Southern Utah, both or neither?
I just want to point out, Brian, very quickly, your assumption that Sac State is either independent or Conference USA, don't forget that there's also the Pac-12, who desperately are looking for people, the Mountain West, who might have to backfill from Pac-12 stealing them, and the ACC. Do not forget vaunted ACC schools like Cal and Stanford. So there is precedent here for Sacramento State to join the Atlantic Coast Conference. All the fuckery aside, Brian, it's really weird when a guy in Fargo is reporting about 2 schools in Utah possibly going to the Big Sky. But when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, it's because their programs are all going to go join the Summit League, which the Dakota schools are intimately familiar with. So that brings you down to the UAC, who has now 9 football members.
And just one thing, if listeners don't know, Summit League is college basketball. Summit League basketball teams are typically in the Missouri Valley Football Conference. There is no Summit League football conference. So the fact of those schools having joined the Summit League means their football school, they may be looking for home in football.
Yeah. So, which comes back to, again, the UAC, which is already the WAC and the ASUN put together. When you look at the WAC schools and you're down to Southern Utah, Utah Tech, Abilene Christian, and Tarleton State. Okay, well, ACU is probably going to do their own thing because they're a private school. They got money. Tarleton State is probably trying to go FBS. I cannot imagine that they have a whole lot of interest in joining the Big Sky, which then circles back to, okay, Southern Utah and Utah Tech. You know, right now I have zero interest, Brian. Zero interest in either of those schools. Sac State leaves, and let's say UC Davis goes with them. Okay, yeah, you know, let's consider it. Sure, let's think about bringing them in, but honestly, I don't see what the real niche is for Southern Utah and Utah Tech to come in, other than, you know, the directional rivalries of Northern Arizona and Southern Utah will be vaunted like they were back then. I don't see a whole lot of reason for the Big Sky to actively go add them. Now, if Sac State gets to the FBS and UC Davis leaves with them, and maybe the Montana schools go, or, you know, whatever realignment happens, yeah, sure. If you need to add schools, fine. They're probably 2 of the easiest to add. Outside of that, don't add them.
Dallas, you would say no, do not add those schools. Yeah. Losing 2 schools would take the number of teams in the Big Sky Football Conference down to 10. That would help solve short term. Mm-hmm. One of the big problems that every fan in the Big Sky has is not being able to play every team. And like, you know, having your schedule go down to just having one team you miss out on. That sounds like a pretty good world to me. So that is what I would want first. And the second reason I want that is Utah Tech and Southern Utah are 2 travelable FCS schools to schedule out of conference for Big Sky schools. Now, I know you can schedule Big Sky schools out of conference, but it doesn't happen that much. It's usually a marriage of convenience, like when Idaho and Eastern a few years ago picked up an out of conference game.
Montana State have done it a couple of years.
Yeah, and NAU and Eastern have done it before. It's never, that's not a reliable way to get OOC games. So I like those 2 schools better as out of conference teams. I mean, they're also, neither of them are exactly powerhouses. So they certainly don't strengthen the conference football wise today. The thing that I'm going to push back on you, it's not interest I have at all, because I think the fan experience would be better as we can get down to 9-10 teams in the conference. 10 is probably the right number, and we'll all survive not playing some rotation of top 5 Portland State, Northern Colorado, whatever. Just get that Montana game with Idaho. Get Montana State on every year with Idaho and some of the other regional teams. The reason I think that this could happen is I just think people got to remember, like, you can see conferences fall apart pretty quick. And if you're running a conference, having more teams is insurance of continued existence if you lose some schools. That, to me, would be the main purpose of if the Big Sky were to add more schools. It's more about self-preservation than actually having a better product. Now, I do think the admin of the Big Sky, different than when we've talked about some other admin here. I think Tom Listersill makes a lot of good decisions. He's a sharp guy. I have liked him as the commissioner of the Big Sky Conference. I don't think self-preservation is 0% of his calculus, but I don't think it's solely what he's looking at. So I expect neither of those teams to actually be added. Now, maybe the math changes if Sac State and Davis both leave, but that's 2 pretty big steps that would have to take place. So
yeah. And
barring huge change, I don't want it to happen, and I don't think it will happen.
Yeah, fully agree. I don't think it's going to happen. But again, if Ballsack State is able to parlay getting Brendan Marion to come back down to the FCS, which was the weirdest thing I've ever seen, and then Mike fucking Bibby as their basketball coach. Great coach, much better coach than Person. They're obviously trying to make some sort of noise, Brian. I don't know if that noise is going to take them to the FBS. Maybe it does. Maybe they take UC Davis with. Maybe Cal Poly finally just gives up on football or drops it down to D3. There's so many different ways that this conference could reconfigure itself. I think if you're Tom Wistrcill, you've got to keep your eyes and ears open. And obviously Utah Tech and Southern Utah have probably been in contact with him. But man, it doesn't feel like something you pull the trigger on and start like evaluating your what would that be? 12 full members, assuming that the Utah schools were full members. Is that 12 full members and then 14 football? Like that starts getting pretty intense from a scheduling and working around it standpoint. But you'd have to then be pretty committed to knowing Sac State's not leaving, UC Davis isn't leaving, Cal Poly's not folding. Like there's so many moving pieces that, again, it feels like the best action is inaction. Just kind of look at all your options and then just sit back and wait until something forces you to make the move. As Captain 58 says, if the insurance waters down the conference, is it really insurance? That's kind of my thought on it. Is, man, Southern Utah is fine. Utah Tech is pretty young still in the development of their football program. I don't love them, but we're also talking about the Big Sky here. It's not like Boise State's coming back anytime soon. Like you're not pulling big name schools to come to the Big Sky.
I guess the other thing is if Sac State leaves, then like the conference probably does want an extra basketball school, but so maybe Utah Tech is added more for basketball purposes. But hey, just bringing that up because Sac State's president has been pretty open about FBS aspirations. My sourcing is his Dr. Luke Wood, his own postings on Twitter. On March 24th, yesterday, he said there'd be an announcement in 2 weeks. They had a big announcement to take place first, which was Mike Bibby being hired as basketball coach. We'll talk basketball stuff. I don't know, like later. There's some Idaho transfer news, but it's not a big deal. Like Idaho has 5 players in the transfer portal. Most guys we're fine with. Or Juice Mims, we knew he did senior day stuff, so whatever. We're at an hour and 5 minutes, man. So I think we're good to remind people. Best place to talk Idaho sports online. Join the #OnlyTubs Discord at patreon.com/Tubs of the club for as little as a cup of coffee a month. Conversations going year round. It really spikes during football. But again, like if you want to talk Vandal sports when we're not on the show, that's the best place on the internet to go. It's not close. Patreon.com/Tubs of the club.
You said it, Brian. One final comment from Captain 58. If Sac and Davis peace out, that leaves Coward Poly on an island. I could totally see them folding. That would be a very Cal Poly move. And again, that's where like it's so hard to say, yeah, like you got to bring these schools in because who knows what's going to happen if let's say Portland State just disappears, as Jason Mayer says, in order of likely to leave football, Sac State, UC Davis, Portland State, Cal Poly. Man, if Portland State gets out of there, the whole thing might like everything could change. No reason to go grab 2 cruddy schools just because you got to prep up. I can understand why they do it, but
I mean, if you're losing a top 5 school, then you have to act differently.
that is when you got to call Boise State and get them back. Because how do you replace the loss of Portland State? By replacing it with another school that is not a state. With that said, go Vandals.
Go Vandals.
What? Brian, you said something.
You were muted when you said go muted. Vandals.
Let's go.
Vandals.